All right. Hello, everybody. This is going to be a short little interlude session. Uh, I don't know really what's going to happen, but you guys are all just defeated the demons and freed Irakondis, settling down for the night, um, resting in your various tents and whatnot, and also whatever various kinds of furniture that Irakondis has brought out for you, because they do bring out like
They bring out a couch.
yeah, they bring out like some linens and some other kinds of furniture. Maybe not a couch, but like a couple lounge chairs. Since
It's really
you
been,
are underground, so it's
yeah.
not sunny out or anything at the moment. Although there is kind of light that starts to dim as the night starts to hit. Why don't we start with Will?
Oh, because it's 7 in the morning, and that's just cruel. Um,
Will, you
hold
have
on.
just finished speaking with Irakondis about what you're looking for, inquiring about your master.
Um, I think I didn't conceive of a world where I had to think of something to talk about first. Um, I guess will um after I think talking to Uber, which we already did, was like the most important thing. Um, but then afterwards, we'll kind of be kind of playing along uh because she doesn't have to like occupy two hands anymore to play her instrument because she can like do a weird like finger plucking thing on a fiddle or something. She's kind of relearning those things to do absently. Um and she says to Uber and kind of everybody, she's like, "Oh, I actually did work something out." And she like points at Uber and starts the really low Gathite hum that is normally her healing word, and then she uh like clicks her fingers, and the warmth of that song that is like infusing Uber begins to like shift, and then it's also like affecting Medea, uh and they're both getting healing word at the same time. She's like, I'm pretty sure I worked out how to use the spell in a way that you can change who it affects on a really small level. And she's like trying to denote with her one hand because the other one's still doing fiddling. She's trying to note that like she picks it up from Uber and drops it onto Medea and stuff like that. It's really strange to tinker with the more divine arts. And she
Oh,
ends the song.
Sweet.
I should roll to see how well that heals. Just because maybe it's great. It's an average healing will, but
You both feel, although I think technically this would be the before the long rest, so some of you still had some damage taken. So some of your wounds are healed in this moment. And
anyway, it it made me think of something for that spell that you use, Uber, the mocking thing. Will probably knows the name for it, but it's like in an arcane language that she's like, if I say that, nobody will understand what that word is. And she says, I think uh, if it's something that you would be interested in, we could work together to maybe change the way that your magic interacts with things.
Uba looks a little bit skeptical, but at the same time nods and is like, I would be willing to try that.
Will smiles and says, either way, if it doesn't work, it's fun to like learn what the limitations of spell weaving really is.
Uba is not as studious as Will is, but nods along and is kind of excited to try something out. Maybe they can cause a little bit of chaos with their magic. Who knows?
Chaos mark. That's fun now.
Sulveran is just squinting. He started squinting the moment that Will said something about changing divine magics, and is just peering at Uba. And then since Will pointed at Medea, he's just kind of crossed over to sit next to Medea and inspect them as though he suspects that something would go wrong with doing healing word that way.
Never.
Medea is like sort of doing the like, I feel like there's like a half log in this cave for some reason. Is that accurate, Andrew?
Sure, why not? You're a little bit
Yeah,
quiet, by
because
the way. Just maybe for
oh, okay. Is this better? Yeah.
you.
And I feel like Medea is doing the like half laying down against the log, watching this. And like I feel like they have like their rations and they like pick it up and like lift the mask a little bit to throw it into their mouth as if they're watching some sort of theater show. Well, I see you finally decided to return the favor of putting on a play. This will be interesting.
Yeah, so in that case, Sulveran is going to like take part of their half log and plop not entirely dissimilarly on this log. As he like goes to lay his head down, he realizes and he like shifts, giving Medea more space than he normally would because of their hair splayed everywhere.
Medea will like lean over to Sulveran and sort of like snidely remark, if they do bad, do you have any fruit to throw at them?
A play. And he's like sitting there, and he is going to pull from his pouch the single berry that Will had passed him earlier, and it's a little desiccated and squashed looking, and he is just going to gravely pass it over to Medea.
Thank you. Come on, Will, show us what you know of the divine.
Will kind of it was pretty much just that spell that I had been working on, but I think she is in better spirits than she has been recently, and will start to play like a really maybe if you followed which god would Will commit sacrilege against? Like it's basically a sea shanty that used to be a hymn. Maybe it's the god of the sea whose name I always forget because
Similis?
it's that name, Samilis.
Yeah.
All right, it's like a hymn to Samilis. So it was originally a hymn, but now it's a sea shanty, but it still reveres Samilis. He like plays it and says, "You don't really know that much about particular gods, but this is one that the priests on my first ship, one of them would play this song."
Mm-hmm.
I roll to see if it's any good because it's an old one. It's terrible. Will hates playing sea shanties. Yeah, it's like halfway between a hymn and a sea shanty, and it's not good at being either.
Yeah, so you're like playing this for a bit. It's a very strange song because you know how do you turn prayer into a little ditty? Very difficult.
Yeah. It's like trying to write a dubstep hymn. It's just like, well, okay. It's not going to be good.
I'm sure it sounds great.
Yeah, it still sounds better than most people playing this song, probably. But the song is at fault, not Will. But yeah, she kind of finishes it up, and it brings back a little bit like memory stuff that she doesn't really want to think about. So she kind of shrugs, and then looks over at everybody else and says, "Anyway, I have just been thinking about the way that magic works. It's not a particularly big deal." And she a little bit goes back into her own head about stuff for a while, and I think probably switches her instrument back to a hurdy-gurdy. Her comfort instrument, the hurdy-gurdy.
The most comforting of all instruments, truly.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
A bagpipe in a box, the hurdy-gurdy.
I think at this point, unless Will had more to say, Uba is going to approach Sulveran. If that's okay.
Sulveran is
Um,
going to just kind of look over from where he is sprawled against this log and blink at Uba.
Okay, yeah, Uba's gonna come. Is there room on the log for Uba to sit down?
There is.
Okay.
Yeah, there's definitely enough.
I mean, if
Okay.
Uba sits down on the log, like he's gonna be like behind and above Sulveran because he's just kind of he's mostly laid out on the floor or the ground because he wouldn't.
Okay. So Uba's gonna come and sit on the ground next to you and is like clearly wants to ask you something, but also looks very pissed. So they're gonna be sitting there for a second trying to like gather up what they want to say. So they just kind of awkwardly plunk down and look pissed and are like dead quiet and not quite looking at you at first. But eventually Uba turns to you and is clearly still mad and said, I wanted to thank you for saving my life during the battle that we've just recently faced." And then they'll kind of pause and then look very angrily at you and say, "But did you have to be so rude about it?"
Uh, rude.
And Uba puffs themselves up a little bit and says, "You both insulted me and used some sort of stinging healing magic when I was on death's door."
The stinging healing magic that I did. Rude. When did I insult you, Uba? And he's actually like pulling himself to sit up, then kind of realizes that puts him very high again compared to Uba, and so he kind of shifts and just gestures at the log, kind of like reflexively, like somebody would if they were talking to somebody young, trying to like get on their level.
Yeah. Uba's gonna kind of scoff and say, "Well, if you weren't trying to insult me, that was one of the rudest ways I can think of to heal somebody." Yeah, and then that's all they have to say about that.
I will say that yes, my healing is not as tender as I have seen it might be appropriate here. Are you talking about when you fell?
Uba looks annoyed, but then nods.
At that, Sulveran's like tense shoulders just sort of relax, and he goes, "But it was dishonorable."
Um, Uba is clearly thinking about whether to not to just like go off on Sulveran, but is going to, since they're still grateful that Sulveran saved their life, they're gonna take like a big breath to like calm down. And is gonna try and let it go. And they're gonna say, be that as it may, I've been thinking, I would like to learn how to heal like that too.
Specifically, I'm not certain that I. And he's going to stop and just Will. And as he calls Will over, he returns his focus to Uba. What I called you dishonorable, that was just to remind you of what you could do. Not healing per se, as you might have noticed, and he indicates, the ground as though to remind you about what happened immediately after that. But the healing, that is a gift. What Will is saying here about being able to, and he points at two different people, that sounds like nonsense to me.
Uba just laughs at that.
I could perhaps teach you to worship as I do and ask for similar gifts, but I can't manipulate spells like that. He stops, with the exception of a little bit of pain versus less pain. Will, can you teach spells without? And he just gestures at the sky, at the world around him.
Will says, I suppose I could probably teach you to do something. It's I think my brain is not working. Ranger magic is divine magic, right?
I don't actually. I don't think so.
It's
Is
more
it
related
green
to
magic?
like druidic magic.
Yeah, I was gonna say Uba's definitely not.
Oh, Will, that's divine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
apparently, yeah, rangers are divine.
Yeah,
yeah.
but I do know rangers have the ability to learn cure wounds. But
Yeah. I think Will says, I think realistically, my understanding of magic comes from learned magic and then the nature of bardic creativity. I could maybe help you learn the nature of healing spells. I don't know if I could impart the exact knowledge on how to cast the healing spell that I cast, nor the healing spell that Sulveran could cast. Though I do suspect, Sulveran, that you could alter your magic as I do, given enough impetus and interest in doing so. But, perhaps that's an affront to your god, and you shouldn't do that.
Okay. Your magic is most similar to mine, from what I can tell. But even then, there's still some distance. You're sort of a mix between these two. You draw from nature, which is both an arcane and divine thing.
yeah, Uba nods, and Uba is not quite following the more scholarly talk, but they're trying.
But if you want to learn something like, perhaps you could try to do something with the tradition of both of them.
Uba is a little bit skeptical about divine magic, but nods because at this point they're not desperate to learn how to heal, but they're like kind of nervous about not having the ability to heal themselves. So they're willing to try whatever they can to learn how to heal.
I think, in your interest, there are many ways of learning. The best is practice.
Uba, this is my question. What do you think about when you give someone that mark spell that you do?
Uba hasn't thought about this before, so they just kind of sit there and they are quiet for a few seconds. And eventually they say, it's a bit difficult to describe, but I try to focus all of my energy and all of my strength on one creature at one time.
This is what I think. I think rangers draw their power from multiple places. I think maybe Uber worships at the altar of Uber. It's hard to say your name twice in that accent. Maybe if you wanted to heal something, I would focus on the pride that you hold within yourself and try and project that onto someone. It might heal them. It might make you want to kill them. That's what
Uba,
experimentation's about.
yeah, Uba's like nodding along, like they thought about getting offended for like 2 seconds, but now they're like, no, that actually does make sense. So they're gonna nod and say, right. And just kind of like awkwardly look around the circle and be like, anybody need any healing? So who wants to be the guinea pig, basically?
I think everybody
Sulveran's
needed
going
healing in this at this point.
Yeah,
Do you want
Sulveran's
me to
going to rec-
punch myself? I can punch Sulveran.
Uh,
Uh,
I
Uba can go ahead and attempt a healing. It will, and if it goes wrong, then that's a moment of dearly needed
Right.
revenge, I think. Medea, I do not believe I need any further injury, particularly from you. And he just looks balefully at their massive like armor and
Yeah, video, like,
biceps.
slowly, like, nod. Hmm. It is fortunate you do not. Most fortunate.
For the record, I have punched Silver and it did nothing.
You punched my armor.
Mm.
Yes. If you want to punch Sulveran, you go for the joint.
Seems. I think it would still do little. Anyway, Uber, you try your best.
okay. So Uba's gonna like just like kind of go up next to Sulveran and put their hands on Sulveran and like scrunch up their face really hard, like they're thinking about like I don't know, the most difficult thing to think about that they've ever tried to think about. Or is Sulveran actually hurt? Do you want me to actually use cure wounds, or were you restored after the last session?
Well, we're before the long rest, so like you can roll the die if you have the spell slots and want to. Otherwise, it doesn't
Okay.
really matter because we're gonna take a long rest right after this canon.
Okay, yeah, I will. It was gonna try doing cure wounds.
As they're doing this to him, Sulveran looks completely calm, like he is absolutely not concerned that anything will go wrong.
Shockingly, it didn't.
Does make perfect sense that Uber has one wisdom, plus one wisdom.
Yeah, of course.
Wiser than
Uh,
Will.
So are there any arcane effects to this magical new healing word? Or cure wounds?
I'll say that since most of Uba's magic is shiny and gold, I'll say that like the tips of their fingers glow like a faint gold. And then they like jump up and they're like, "Oh, I did it!"
Will claps.
Well done.
Video does the, like, slow nod of approval and gives a thumbs up.
Yeah. So Uba is pretty pleased with themselves, so they're just gonna kind of sit down and look slightly smug.
It's like,
Only slightly.
Only
that wasn't-
slightly. They're still a little shook up.
That wasn't even a spell that I could cast. Will is very like proud of like that is a good like first manifestation of magic.
That was a good try. But yeah, so
Well done.
what was that?
That was well done.
Uba nods and says thank you. And climbs up and sits on the log.
Sulveran makes a very deliberate demonstration of how much more comfortable he is feeling as he lays down. Wipes a bit of blood away from a scrape that is no longer there, settles into place.
Will sighs a little bit and says, well, I suppose I should start working out how to explain everything that's happened to Kala and Alveron.
Make it a story.
But
She kind of shrugs and says, I think that's probably more Uba's domain.
Uba nods and says, but it could have music.
That's true.
And it could have the truth.
Uba is like, yeah.
If you tell the story, Uba, there'll be 16 50-foot tall demons that it took to take you down.
Well, I mean, to be fair, it did take quite a number of demons to take Uba down.
Uba nods very vigorously.
Will, I think, was on top of an ice thing for much of Uba being taken down by one strike of a demon, but chooses to not mention that aspect. But does kind of look at Sulveran for a moment and say, "Oh, Sulveran, I looked at the notes you gave me, and I will add some to them and return it."
And yeah, and I think with your roles, as you're kind of reading over the notes, those what Sulveran is writing down is definitely highlighting for you the differences between the two
Yeah.
Gathite people that you've come to know. Your former shipmates versus Sulveran is very interesting to see. And it's very
Yeah, I
evident
think
in that.
And I think I rolled a history to see like where Will was at in terms of how much Gathite she had tried to absorb, and then the insight to see that like difference. And she's just like, well, ultimately, Gathite are as disparate as any other race, depending on where they come from. But I suspect that's useless information. So yeah, we'll start working on that. I need to, as Jack, talk to Andrew a bit more about the Gathite that I traveled with, I think. But other than that, we'll just, I think, hang out, playing, interjecting into other people's conversations if called for, but doesn't have anything in particular to talk about. Although she does have to ask the dragon something, but we can do that in the actual session, I'm sure.
Yeah, same for Sulveran. He wants to ask in the actual session. I think he wants to just he wants to talk to the dragon again. But he's going to turn to Medea and study them idly for a long moment before just gesturing at the hair. Are you going to hide it with an additional helm?
No, I'm comfortable enough with it out. Surround you folk for the moment being.
Could you say that last bit just once more?
Comfortable enough letting it out, at least around you folk. I generally make it a rule not to let things like that be seen, as I did in that room, unless I am in a life or death situation with someone at least once. The bar fight did not feel so deadly, nor the bandits, but the giant demon trying to kill a dragon with a horde of enemies in a room, perhaps feels risque.
Fair enough. I suppose the worm didn't count either. Is that moss?
It's an unfortunate gift of my parentage, yeah. Comes with some benefits, but those are few and far between. Many, many issues.
I didn't say it was unfortunate. Um, we use moss for bandages. It's just interesting.
Seeing I do similar with my own. I make some use of it where I can. And like I think they actively get out the comb and start pulling it out now that Sulveran has commented on it. And like get out like a small wooden bowl to put it in.
Uba's like staring very intensely and very closely because they're like, I've never seen anything like this before and I'm very interested. So probably not the most subtle in their staring. Not in a rude way, just a curious way.
Will is more subtle but still staring. And not much more subtle.
Pelagon, in contrast, is not subtle and just is like, interesting hair.
Yes.
This is why I spent hours confined looking the other way on our travels, isn't it?
Oh, that and I have anxiety. Yeah.
Will kind of smiles and says, "It's very pretty, your hair." And she like tilts her head, and she's thinking about like what it would be like if her hair was some kind of vegetation, and like what vegetation that would have to be the color that it is. And she gets lost in like a dream of having coral hair, which just is like scrapey and salty all the time. It's awful.
What do you think about when I'm saying that? It's nice to hear that. Growing up, my mother often compared it to a bush, particularly overgrown bush in the forest.
At that comment, Sulveran is going to like unconsciously like run a hand through his own mohawk, which does tend to stand fairly upright.
They're gonna like
I
look
am
to
familiar with
Uba,
that.
I think,
they're gonna look.
I think when you say that, Pelagon, it's just like, a great compliment.
But he is gonna look to Uba, still staring at him and being like, "Do you want to ask questions, or is this just sort of a look by learning thing?"
Uba is slightly startled that Medea even realized that they were staring, even though it was incredibly obvious. And says, just looking," and like dramatically looks in the opposite direction.
You can ask questions, I will answer them.
Uba turns back and is going to say this, not trying to be rude, but it might come across as rude, but is like, I have never heard of any creatures that have plants for hair.
Well, neither had I until I was the age of 13, and it started coming in. That was an interesting moment in my life.
Uba is kind of surprised by that and said, "So you didn't always have it?"
Well, there are a few features of me that I always had, but what I am is sort of a grab bag of different features or oddities.
Uba's kind of slightly struggling in this conversation because they're like lightly furry, like almost like a peach fuzz all over, but they don't actually have hair, so they're a little confused.
I'm sure Will has figured out the particulars by this moment.
Will nods, but still is not going to ask directly that question and says, "You said that your hair grew in when you were 13. How old are you now?"
Ah, decent bit older than 13.
All right. Will makes a
I
note
am.
in Will's mind palace. 13 plus.
I actually hadn't decided that yet. Put a note. Well,
Older than 13.
it's been a number of decades since.
That's
I live a bit longer than humans or other people. So please keep that in mind. But I believe the number is somewhere around 50, 60-ish.
Uba, again, not trying to sound rude, but may sound like it, says, "You look great for your age."
Um,
Staring at a mask.
yeah.
To be fair, Ubo, we've literally only seen a growth of mossy hair, which, albeit very attractive, that could also be a mask of some kind, though that would be weird, given the nature of Medea.
Oh gods, I do wish it was fake.
Just attached to your mask. You just take it off
I
and put
have.
it on there.
There have been many times in my life where I try to cut it, but as a cunning gift with the divine seems to regrow especially quickly until it's back to about this height. As to aid me in my journeys, helping others.
I wonder if there's spells and how they would affect your hair. What if someone cast some kind of spell of growing plants on your hair? Would that work?
I have no idea. I have no real understanding of the arcane.
We could make you bald if we used blight. Will shrugs and says, I'm going to think about
Why,
it some more.
you're welcome to try.
Will's just going to not develop any useful spells. All Medea hair-based spells from now on.
Will's getting a second career as like a hairstylist.
Hey,
But
you don't
he
know
is
that Will
gonna,
isn't a hairstylist.
Fair enough.
but he is going to look to Uba and say, I should just clarify. Um, how do I put it? Do you know how blue eyes work in humans in particular?
Uba shakes their head.
Some traits are rare and can skip generations of people. They only pop up once in a while, depending on the genetics are right. And my family in particular never lost a touch for the divine we apparently had for a long time.
Uba has very little concept of what genetics are, but is nodding sagely.
I don't think Medea does either. Probably blood would have been the more appropriate word.
When they say that, Sulveran like straightens up and looks very smug. I did say it when we first met.
Well, I think you may have the idea, or the wrong idea, of who my divine parentage comes from.
Does it matter who exactly it comes from? And as he's saying this, he has been kind of leaning over and he's just very visibly, like with body language, broadcasting that he is totally ready to take some of that moss from the bowl that Medea has pulled out. Because he's, as an herbalist, he's very interested in, what it looks like and smells like and feels like.
You just
Medea
cultivate
will
the herbs.
just calmly hand it over. I have tried to grow plants in it before. No, it does not work.
Uba is going to take a second, and when they heard you say divine parentage, because Uba has no clue, what Medea is. He's just gonna go, "Are you a god?"
No.
Says, on a when you get down to a small enough scale, everyone's a god.
Uba thinks very hard about this.
Will doesn't pay attention to Uber's reaction, but does pay attention to Sulveran's reaction.
Sulveran just
Are you trying to get? Are you trying to commit blaspheme intentionally? If
Will
so, I commend you. I've done it many times in temples, and they still refuse to put me down.
Will laughs and says, "No, sir. We will. Well, I don't know about these two, but I will never be a god quite in the way that Sil or Peridor are gods. But if you came across a colony of ants that were sentient, and they saw you tinge your fingertips gold and touch another being and imbue it with life, would they not think you to be some kind of giant god above them?"
Uva is definitely thinking very hard about this and is nodding along.
Again,
Probably getting
I'm
not
not
great
saying
ideas, but
I'm not saying specifically you were a god, Uber. Anyone through the right lens can appear to be a god. It's
Uva looks slightly
I'm not saying
disappointed.
you're a god, Uber.
they're
Does that mean one day?
encouraging him.
Does that mean one day someone might put their foot on Alamein and squish them like a bug?
Well, at least Alamein would know exactly the etymology of the foot as it hit.
Ah, they would. Yes. As the story goes, a long time ago, one of my parents did a favor for some of the gods, and we ended up with a touch or a gift in the bloodline. It was sort of hard. Usually how
Sulveran
it is. The gods normally don't actually mingle with humans. They occasionally impart gifts.
Sulveran is going to nod very confidently at that, and then he's going to he's probably going to everything from sniff, like tease out the feeling of the moss, and at the end of his inspection, he's probably just going to taste it, take a bite of it with no qualms.
I will, as I'm playing the instrument and have attuned to it over what I imagine is a short rest, at least by now, and seeing that Sulveran is trying to understand something about this, I will strum I'll do it's a hurdy-gurdy still because she's in comfort mode, but she's playing, and I'll use the ability of it to give bardic inspiration to both Sulveran and Uber to help their understanding of things.
Sulveran is, of course, interested in the medicinal aspects of Medea's moss, particularly anything that they might not already be using it for.
I'd make a medicine check to taste the hair.
See if it can be fermented into alcohol. That's the important thing. That's what Alveron would do. It's a
can
D8
attribute
now
Okay.
for bardic inspiration.
Let's see what this time.
Yeah.
24. Tastes very fresh, just been plucked.
It's kale.
It tastes almost like, or it smells kind of like, like a freshly cracked open book. Sort of what it smells like.
Weird.
You actually think that it doesn't have any innate healing properties whatsoever. It seems to just be common moss, other than as a binding agent or something like that. At least not once removed and sitting in this bowl.
It doesn't do much without my own touch.
Sulveran's going to nod. I see that. Fascinating. Still useful for packing bandages, though. And he's going to just pass what remains of the moss back into the bowl.
Hope you have fun with my hair.
There is a note when removed from Medea is added to Will's list of notes about Medea's hair.
Yeah, it just becomes, common moss. So whatever the healing properties of common moss are replicable.
It doesn't do very much on its own, but it is one of the things I extended. I can also make it glow if you want to do that. I can do that pretty much whenever.
Uba yells, "Yes!"
Medea will pluck out some and make some glow and put it on a rock and toss it to Uba. I can do this. I can do this for fucking hours.
Uba's
I
just
can only
excited
put it
to have
on.
something shiny.
I can only put this on one thing at a time. And they'll put it on another rock as the old one fades and throw this one to Uba. It's
Uba's having a
super
field
helpful.
day.
It'd be super helpful if I couldn't already see in goddamn dark, but you know how it is.
Sulveran looks sharply over. It doesn't work in the darkness we encounter today, does it?
What doesn't?
Could you say again?
You said, what doesn't in the dark?
The
Hold up
glow of the glow of the that Medea makes.
Oh, well, I can see in the dark anyways in two different ways. I could see inside that darkness as well.
This time his how dare you blaspheme face that he gave to Will is settled on Medea. Well,
There, just so we're all clear, they were referring to the magical darkness of the Abishai.
Yeah, no, Medea has blind sight.
Oh, well, that's okay.
Yeah.
You're confusing
So
them
you
slightly.
couldn't see.
You couldn't see, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
You could sense.
Yeah.
well, as long as somebody got a clear view of my dishonor. We used to play a game, give each other nicknames, like the chieftain might, for what we have done in a day's battle. An example. Today, and he's going to look at each person in turn before settling on Will. And as he settles on Will, he crosses his arm, he stretches out. Today you would be Wallfaller, perhaps.
Of all that I did today, that is certainly the thing of most note.
True.
I don't have notes about myself. Will.
Yeah, and he just kind of gestures with his head, indicating that somebody else ought to try.
I would perhaps give Uba the name Backstabber. Or
Uba likes that and nods.
perhaps Will could be, get a name more reminiscent, such as,
Why can't I be Wall Climber? I also
yeah, I was
climbed the
going
wall.
to say, what about, Wall Climber, or, Brave Face?
Will hates all of these. Will barely tolerated her Gathite name, which was far more respectful than Wallfaller.
The truth
Sulveran,
is
you're-
that Chieftain never sees you in the moments that you actually hold glory.
That's
Sulveran,
not my experience.
how about we give you a name such as Nickname? Or,
Nickname. How about shouts at person that just got stabbed a lot?
You forgot the most important
Shouts
part.
at person that just got stabbed a lot.
Medea nods sagely. That's more
Will's
like
unconvinced about the the grammar of that, but it's fine.
Yeah, Sulveran is actually legitimately confused about the grammar of this and leans in. Common is not my strong suit. But is that where the goes?
Yes, that is where the
Will
goes. And they look to Will as if like trying to get Will to join in on this.
Will makes an incredibly strong joke about the term ergo versus the ergos, but I can't do it at 7 a.m. My brain's not working for English enough for that joke, but Will is. Will says, when I was on with the Gathite tribe, of which I consider myself at least an honorary member. I think they still consider me to be of some import. I don't remember. But I do. They gave me the nickname Woodwalker because we were attacked by pirates during a storm. And as the cannon fire ripped apart our decks, I was flung through the air, much like how I fell off the wall today, I suppose. But
Repeating your act is great.
the chief said that it looked like my feet were was finding the wood and dancing through the rainstorm. So maybe next time you give someone a nickname, Sulveran, you could phrase it like that. So you take their failure and you make it look beautiful, as opposed to just telling everyone that I fell off a wall. Also, it wasn't a very high wall, and it was made of ice. Like, I haven't spent a lot of time running across ice.
Sulveran is just he's still leaning back, and he is progressively like bringing his lips into a flatter and flatter line, and then he just kind of clears his throat and casually puts his hand in front of his mouth like this. I'll keep it in mind.
Well, did you do anything before you were a sailor?
I was a child.
Was there a joined period where you were a child and a sailor, or did you keep this thing separate?
I would consider it to be an age where I was a child and a sailor. I left my home when I was 12, and I joined aboard a ship called the Skipping Stone, although it is actually called, and she says the Skipping Stone, but in Gathite. Says, it's very pretty to see Gathite runes across the side of a ship. But no, I was a cabin girl, and then she kind of shrugs. And I got this coat, which for me then was, well, not this coat, but my other coat. It was, and she kind of gestures to like below where her feet are, like it would have hung across the ground when she got it at first, because it was built for a small Gathite man. But no, I have been a sailor for almost, well, I'm not a sailor now, but I was a sailor for almost 20 years.
What made you leave?
I had a misunderstanding about what adventure was and the role that normal people played in adventure, and I found it distasteful to continue living to be the daughter of a blacksmith and a baker who really are probably the best people I've ever met. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun to go and join a ship? And then I did that for a long time, and I didn't go home for a long time. My hometown and my family are and were great. I was a child and I made a decision which hurt people a lot for really no reason.
I made a similar decision in my life, but it seems you've had time to reflect. Uba, why did you decide to come out here? You know, move beyond where you had happy hunting.
Uba kind of sits there for a moment and says, I felt that the place that I was from didn't have as many opportunities for me as other places. Came from a very small place, made a name for myself there, and knew it was time to try out something new.
It asks Sulveran, but from what I know, I imagine might not want to divulge why you left.
Sulveran's going to. I seem to remember the last time we had this conversation. You asked me, and then deftly avoided my return question. He's going to look back up towards the area where the pool was that they've descended from the steps of. And he's sitting there. But as he's sitting, he's kind of moving a little bit, indicating that he's still thinking and working his way through the question.
So complicated.
Not complicated. It is merely, and then he looks to Pelagon, and he suddenly, it's just like a sudden contentment. He looks at Pelagon. He knows how unacceptable it is to go off on one's own among my people.
Banishment. Self-imposed or not.
It is, and he looks over to Uba. He says, far more dishonorable than falling in battle. I left because I failed. And as he says that, despite the fact that he's admitting a failure, he looks a lot like Medea will notice that he looks a lot calmer about that than the last time they talked, and he struggled through trying to say nothing with as many words.
Well, I'm glad at least, and though you failed, you found a life in your living.
Could you say that last portion a bit? You fuzzed out after though you failed.
Though you failed, I am glad you found an adequate life.
He's gonna look at every single person in turn and look very, very self-satisfied.
Do you think Alveron is dead yet?
I would
I
have got a
give it a-
response from Kala from my sending that I sent earlier, I think. Although maybe that's tomorrow morning.
No, that was after.
Okay.
Do you think it's
You haven't had time to prepare that level of spell yet.
I'm giving it an 80-20.
That Alveron is dead?
At 80% that Alveron is alive, 20 is dead. Not out
I
of
would
any
take
particular
those odds.
misadventure with Kala, just that he did something in town that had it happen.
No, I think the chances of Alveron being dead, he seems likely to be the most cautious of all. Well, the most cautious of all of you.
Really?
Yeah,
He
there's
seems-
something about Alveron that seems like a man used to surviving. One could say he
Maybe
makes
he's-
something of it. Will doesn't laugh at her own joke, but I liked that joke.
Belgon laughs,
Sulveran.
but it's delayed. Like a half second later. Oh,
do you all,
this is a good one.
do you all intend to see through the path of fighting demons?
Will says, I will honor my promise to Kala and my promise to Uba. If it leads to fighting demons, sure, but maybe it leads to not fighting demons. Maybe this is the last time we'll fight demons and everything will be great. That's how stories normally go. They do the prologue and then nothing.
Is there like an Immersion equivalent of like the Odyssey or like Hercules or like a similarly like tragic Greek tale that's widely known?
Right, the Thracian Odyssey.
It would depend on where you're from. There are probably multiple stories
there-
like that of equivalents.
Is there a big one in Thrate?
Sure, there's probably a couple. Yeah. I don't have one off the top of my head that I think of.
It's called the Thracian Tragedy. It's been
Yeah.
turned into a play in 4 acts because people don't like 5 acts anymore.
As all great playwrights note, at the end of their best works, everybody goes home, kisses their wife, their 2 kids, meets their dog, lives a happily ever after.
But Will passes some information and was unaware that dogs were so ubiquitous in Thrate, and now it's like, all right, Medea was right about the Vegapygmy, so surely that means that Medea knows that there's a lot of dogs in Thrate.
Are there
Only
a lot of dogs in Crete?
Not particularly so, more so than anywhere else. There's lots of dogs everywhere. People like dogs.
Okay. Well, does it have the sort of Mediterranean Turkish culture of taking care of street animals? Does that inspiration carry over so much?
No, I mean, it depends on where you're at.
Yeah, Thrate's huge.
only 2 children? What have these heroes done to be so bereft?
Will laughs, forgetting the nature of Gathite families versus other racial families.
Pelagon will step into this point and say, I have traveled in these lands a bit longer than you. Most humans and others do not have very many children. Even dwarves and elves might have many children, but over the course of a long lifetime, not so many at once.
My mother only had 1 and threw the bag in.
That seems awfully lonely.
It depends. The what's the word? Foragers, no, farmers that I've met. Some of them have had large families. 8 kids as many.
One of my neighbors had 10, which was an exorbitant amount. When I asked how her mother dealt with having so many children, she would often regale us with high tales, such as that she found one climbing on a tree, yelled out for a mother nearby, and after an hour none came and decided that one was hers.
I grew up in a town called Breakers Hill, and one of the families had 5 children, and we used to joke that on any given holiday you could see a new child rolling down the hill from their house. Which is, as an adult, I understand not a great joke to be making, but it was very funny when I was 11.
It's still very funny.
Will shrugs. It's such a medium joke to Will now. I didn't ask last time I went back about that house and that family. She has a moment of thinking about a lifetime of failures to where she's from and her family, and kind of bounces back very quickly. Quicker than it's clearly not the first time she's thought about these things. So, anyway, yeah, there's not a lot of bigger families, particularly where I'm from, which is she kind of just gestures vaguely to the west of where we are. In that direction for a while. If you get to Twinport, you got too far. And in general, in life, if you get to Twinport, you've gone too far.
I went to Twinport once.
That is
I did not know a city could smell so bad. It's like someone collected all of the garbage in the world, made it a candle, put it right up to your nose.
I think if you were to put a ring of doctors around Twinport, at a certain point, they could just preemptively try and cure the disease you're going to get from walking into Twinport.
I think going into Twinport might perhaps counter the disease in and of itself.
It's certainly a disease of the mind to need to go there regularly.
Sulveran is fascinated by this, looking back at this, continual deridement of this town that he has never heard of. And he's going to lean into Uba. And he stops working out the correct word in common because now he is aware that he is probably going to unintentionally insult Uba at least 3 more times before the week is gone. People, how many children do you have?
Uba thinks about it for a second and says, certainly depends. It's common to have, possibly anywhere from 4 to 6, but I was the odd one out in my village and I don't have any siblings.
I initially thought you perhaps ate some.
Uba chuckles and says, no.
Andrew, do kobolds lay eggs?
Oh yeah.
So it would be correct to call the children of kobolds like a clutch.
Yeah.
Great. I just want that information for at some point.
Do kobolds have cloacas to lay eggs, Andrew?
Probably. I don't want to get into the biology of it no more than I would about human biology in this matter.
Yeah.
Uba, is it normal for there to be just a single clutch of eggs? Single one among eggs?
You mean like, is it normal to lay or for them to have a single egg, or do you mean like, do they have multiple clutches?
Like, is it normal to just lay a single egg in kobold culture?
Uba shakes their head and says, yeah, it's quite odd for a kobold not to have any siblings, but I guess it just worked out that way.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm glad
just
you went ahead.
What was that, Andrew?
I was gonna say, yeah, just one egg would be quite rare. It's like a chicken only laying one egg. It's a
Yeah.
little strange.
They knew that no other child could shine as brightly as Uba would.
Uba laughs.
Or perhaps that Uba would need protein upon birth.
That's so tragically brutal.
Sulveran this whole time, since Uba had mentioned only having one, is actually sitting there like thinking about numbers and who he would count as siblings. Technically, I suppose I have 5 direct siblings, but a further 3 half siblings, and then he just trails off. I'm near the books.
Was that what drove you mad?
Well, it is my family is somewhat complicated. So the greatest love story I know is that of my parents. He says that they were very late to get married. My grandfather was the man who he makes matches. My people, because our bands are so small, we have to travel from place to place, so as not to marry someone with too close of blood. So my grandfather, the matchmaker, tried for many years to marry off his 2 surviving children, but was largely unsuccessful, and it was humiliating to him. At last, he had sent letters away to another tribe, a friend of his who also had a son and a daughter, yet unwed. And finally, at last, through this correspondence, they did fall in love. And then they went to meet each other, and as I am told, all breath was held because this was always where it had fallen through in the past. And they realized that they had been messaging the wrong people, that there had been an accident early on in communication. And they decided that this was acceptable. And so my mother came home with her wife and my uncle with his husband, and the tribe was pleased.
That's so good.
So
Story goes.
my mother's children, they had to work out an arrangement. So my cousins, they are also my siblings. My siblings are also my cousins.
So that is what drove me mad.
There's definitely a song about that. I
See,
think I heard it from a man.
the story goes is that my father was a boastful merchant in the marketplace. Said that nobody could beat his prices. My mother, a competing merchant, decided to mug him, and he was quite enchanted by her during this event. And over the next few weeks, attempted to court her as she attempted to scare him out of selling her place in the market. Eventually, he won her affections over when he could last in a fight longer than a minute with her. They eloped within the day and quite happy with each other.
Will writes down that story to turn into a song.
Sulveran is like leaning over to Will, quietly asking the definition of mug at this point.
It's certainly not something a merchant does. I wouldn't. If you mug someone, you're not a merchant. But it's violently stealing.
It wasn't so much a mugging as an intimidation. But my mother loves the fragment as such. My father writes it in such flowery prose. Intimidating showdown of kindness. My mother chose to use such words as I beat the shit out of him until he cried. She did say that he was quite pretty as he was crying. Truly a couple for the ages.
I think on that note, you all continue to talk quietly into the night before eventually I think Pelagon falls asleep, and then maybe Uba, and then slowly the rest of you all begin to nod off in the sort of warm undergrowth of this dragon's lair before eventually waking the next morning and then doing all the things that we already talked about last session, and a couple more that we'll do in the next session. All right.
Okay.
So that's a wrap. This is a little mini episode we just decided to do real quick. I think this is going to go up on YouTube, and I think I can upload to Twitch as well, so maybe there as well. We'll see. But if you are watching, thank you as always, and have a good one.